Welcome to Mavericks. I'm Joey Garcia, and in today's episode, we'll be speaking to one of the leading open blockchain voices in Thailand and Southeast Asia. He's the founder and CEO of THAISUB, the largest digital asset trading platform in Thailand. He's a visionary and definitely a maverick. It's Topp. This is Mavericks, brought to you by Zappa Bank. Right, well, morning, Topp. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to have you join us here in Zappa Bank in Gibraltar. It's really great. And I thought I'd like to kick things off talking about some earlier times in your life. I mean, you were educated way back in the day. You had some touch points to the UK. And back then, the technology was very sort of nascent. So, what was the original trigger for you? What created the interest? What was the thing that drove you from, a standard, let's call it education, to something that was very new and innovative and nascent? What were the triggers back then?
I guess BitCup and Zappos, we are the old guys in the industry. I've been in this space for 9 years now. My crypto blockchain journey started in 2013, right after graduation. I did my undergraduate and master's degree in the UK and in economics. And most of the economics students, traditional career paths would be to either go for investment banking or consulting and to stay in the UK, right? But for me, I always wanted to find new experiences. Right? I went to a high school in New Zealand. I did, 5 years in the UK, and I thought, I haven't explored China yet. Mm-hmm. And back then, China was, growing very fast. In 2013, so I decided to apply for a job at one of the boutique investment banking firm. And I decided to choose a boutique one because I prefer to work in a small company and get to see every dimension instead of working for all the largest firms and be one of the small, guys doing the same thing every day. So I decided to fly to China, to Shanghai, after graduation. And have you watched the movie The Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's the industry I was involved in after graduation.
So then, I mean, that's sort of the standard sort of, let's call it the Wolf of Wall Street channel, degree in economics, and this whole new technology that barely existed. What was the first sort of trigger point to that?
Right. So I was involved in the pink sheets stocks.
Right. Okay.
Right? You have NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, OTCQB, QX, and then pink sheets. Very few regulations, and the stocks are volatile. Right. One day at the office, I came across this Bitcoin thing. The price went from $11 back then up to $1,150 in a short period of time. Right. Overtook all the pink sheet stock. Mm-hmm. So I was curious, what is this pink sheet stock, Bitcoin thing? I remember talking to my colleagues, Darren, like, have you heard of this Bitcoin thing? Why is the price so volatile, mm-hmm. right? Shoot up very quickly at 10,000% back then. He didn't bother, right? I was so lucky that I did a few more research, and I came across a blog written by Mark Anderson, mm-hmm. Called Why Bitcoin Matters in 2013. It was a random blog post back then, but now it's a classic, New York Times article. And in that article, I got to see the potential of Bitcoin, how it is going to bank the unbanked, how we can do micropayments for the first time in human history, how developing countries can leapfrog developed nations with the newest, financial infrastructure. And I was exploring what I like, what I don't like after graduation, and I found out that corporate jobs is not for me.
Mm. You were a maverick. A very early day maverick, definitely. Yeah. And that takes you back to Thailand. I mean, back then, again, I imagine industries, regulatory authorities, policymakers, lawmakers. I mean, really, no one would have back in 2013, 14 understood. What was the initial reaction back then? We've spoken to people from different parts of the world. We've seen different things. How did it evolve in Thailand?
Looking back, it was a painful experience, what we've been through. But on the other side, we also achieved miracles, like how we got here today. Right? 9 years ago, I flew back home after Shanghai. I founded the very first Bitcoin wallet company called coins.co.th. The Coinbase of Thailand back then. Before that, there were no order book exchange, right? Just a wallet that hosts. I mean, local Bitcoin was a dominant player back in 2013. And I founded a startup, the first Bitcoin startup in the country from my parents' clothing shop. My parents sell clothes, right? They are small SMEs. So I asked them for a spare room, in the shop, and founded the company with a one-person laptop. It was so funny. I was doing the arbitrage. I created a blank page, right? So customers can submit the buy order and the sell order. And then on the back end, I would go to local Bitcoin. I was free riding on their wallet system. Course, and I was buying from local Bitcoin, selling from local Bitcoin, making small spread, growing from there. And I had no life for like 8 to 10 months. I was hustling by myself, making like small spreads, keeping, saving up to expand the team. And then I remember the Bank of Thailand issued a proper formal letter, right, to all the commercial banks in Thailand saying that Bitcoin could be a Ponzi scheme. The value could go to zero anytime. Do not go anywhere near it. There was an official statement from the Bank of Thailand. Right? And my parents, especially my dad, he was not pleased. Right? They sent me all the way to Oxford. I didn't come from a wealthy family. Right? They had to have lunch boxes every day to save up to send the kids. And I got into a very good school, like Oxford University. So the expectation was high, right? To get a huge paychecks like other friends from after graduation. I was doing this Bitcoin thing nobody have heard of about. And one day the Bank of Thailand said could be a Ponzi scheme. Right? Big fight in the family. Right? My parents could not understand this technology, but I was stubborn, I read a blog written by Mark Anderson and saw the vision. Right? The first utility or application of Bitcoin back then was remittance, right? To disrupt the Western Union, right? Absolutely, yeah.
With the blockchain rail. And I also talked to Dan Chat, an ex-executive of PayPal, right? After the first job in Shanghai, I had a quick 2 weeks job as a financial consultant. I had a chat with him in the Palo Alto, in one of the pancake shop, right, on one of the branches. And I asked him, what do you think about Bitcoin? And he was like, Topp, you're the luckier generation. The original vision of PayPal was not to be this boring payment gateway. They wanted to create the digital dollar, right? But the technology wasn't ready back then. They didn't have cloud computing. They did not have blockchain. They did not have smartphone, right? Everything is ready to be, disrupted now, right? All the infrastructure. You're the luckier generation. Bitcoin is going to change the financial landscape. After talking or connecting the dots, talking to these guys, I was stubborn in the vision. And I pushed forward.
Do you think all innovators need to do that? Do you think that when new industries evolve or new technologies evolve, that kind of thought process is needed to get people to that end game? I mean, I suppose anyone in the application of any new technology, we've seen it in different parts of the world. I mean, I suppose Skype, arguably, if they'd gone through a system of applying for telecoms licenses in 50 countries, I'm not sure how far they would have got. Do you need that determination? Is that something you'd encourage younger people to pursue?
I guess, entrepreneurs are not like 9 to 5, day-to-day jobs. We're a special species that, if you see previous entrepreneurs, those who achieve extreme success, there were the few that see what we call the important truth, the minority few that see the important truth, whereas the majority got it wrong. That's where the opportunity lies, right? The tremendous opportunity lies. I'm not the smartest student in class, right? Just scraping a pass at Oxford, actually. But looking back, I was one of the few minority group of people. We are, right? We were very right about Bitcoin, whereas the rest of the world were very wrong about this technology. Looking back, like 8 years ago, Bitcoin, when we said the word Bitcoin, people would think, oh, money laundering. Oh,
absolutely.
Drug money. Oh, toy money.
oh, dark market, oh, don't go anywhere near it, right? Oh, scammers, right? And I remember we had to even rebrand the company, right? We're not a Bitcoin company, we're a blockchain company.
Yeah.
Right? In 2014, Bitcoin was money laundering, right? That's the perception. In 2015, 16, oh, blockchain is going to change the world. Bitcoin, don't go anywhere near it.
But I suppose we've seen that before, right, Topp? I mean, I would say like early adopters of a lot of new technologies, I'm going to say the internet, are not always the good guys. So the earliest adopters of the internet and what it was used for were not necessarily, and you could say in the early days of, people use the Silk Road example, etc.,
right.
And that's fine. But I mean, what do you think that's got us to where we are today, and how much more do you think there is to go? Where are we on the track? Are we halfway along? Are we at a point where most of the world understands it? Or are we still in early learning days around the technology?
No, I think we're about to reach mass adoption. But you were right. You know, with the newest technology, criminals are the first to adopt it. Right? They're the first to use automobiles.
Yeah.
Telephones to plot conspiracy theory, right? And same with Bitcoin. But that's because their cost is high. I mean, cost of being caught, right? They have the incentives to use the latest technology, and if they win, their profit margin is much higher than other industry too. So it makes sense for them to adopt the latest technology. But it doesn't mean that technology is a bad thing.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like a hammer. If you use a hammer to build a house, then it's going to increase the productivity. But if you use a hammer to hit people, then it's going to be a bad technology.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? Technology, it's neutral in itself.
And let me take you back to what you were saying in terms of developments in Thailand, and there was that notice that came out, or the your parents saw, and there was threat of this being treated as a Ponzi scheme. What happened next? What happened after that?
So in 2014, the Bank of Thailand issued a formal letter to warn the banks first, and then what happened next was the anti-money laundering officers sent me an investigation letter. I was so stressed. Imagine starting a company when I was 23. I didn't know starting the business would be this hard because there was no reporting system in place. No traditional banks in Thailand or actually anywhere in the world has ever submitted a Bitcoin transaction report, right? There must be someone to create a reporting standard. I tried to reach out to all the top legal firms in the country. I have the money to pay. I have these issues. Can you help me? And nobody dares to help because Bitcoin was in a gray area, right? Nobody would risk their reputation for this project. So we ended up creating a proper reporting standard for the country, working with the anti-money laundering officers. We had to invent new reporting standard, new templates, reporting all the computer, laptops, models, IP addresses, all the thresholds, because we cannot use the same threshold as fiat reporting transactions too. I remember after I came back from the anti-money laundering office, half of my employees left the company because they were scared, right? After they found out that we were being investigated. I was so stressed, but that's not the end. And then the Bank of Thailand sent us a proper investigation, invitation letter to come in and explain what we do. Right? Do you have a payments license to operate this Bitcoin company? Do you have a remittance license to operate this Bitcoin company? What about the e-payment license? It was in a gray area because there were no regulations. Right? We were the crazy ones that were pushing the frontiers. So again, I reached out to all the legal firms. Nobody accepted the job because they don't want to risk their reputation. Imagine Bitcoin 8 years ago, in a gray area. So we ended up pitching, explaining to regulators what we trying to do for the country, how the potential of this technology, how it is going to change the financial landscape. Again, after I came back to the office, half of the employees left. we had to rehire. Like,
and what were the reactions of those initial discussions with those regulatory authorities, or were they receptive? Did they understand it? Were they willing to develop? Or what was the reaction back then?
Obviously, there were a lot of doubts.
Of course.
And nobody fully understand the Bitcoin technology or the blockchain technology. I still remember we had to rebrand after that meeting, saying that, oh, we are a blockchain company here. We are doing, innovations. Blockchain is going to change the world. Oh, we don't. Bitcoin was like a word that we would never mention, right? And nobody understand that it's actually, an open blockchain is the same thing, right? So education wasn't catching up. So we had to find the right context to explain to the regulators and the society back then.
And you almost need, Topp, and sorry to interrupt, but in the same way that you thought or saw this as an innovative, new and developing area, you almost need that from the regulatory authorities as well. I think a lot of authorities sometimes react to new technology. We can talk about the Bitcoin protocol at the early days of like, well, we already have law. Let's try and cover it all within the existing law. But what they need to do is think about this as a new and developing ecosystem, and think of new standards or new law or new regulation. And sometimes that's a difficult conversation.
Yeah, and I love this quote. I have to quote it again. The arrival of electric light does not come from a continuous improvement of candles.
Exactly.
Right? You can't continue to develop on candles and expect to arrive at electricity. So it requires new thinking, new framework, new regulations. Sometimes legacy system is not good because it's too costly to change things and the mindset, and it doesn't catch up with technology, right? So maybe set zero may be a better thing to start anew.
And were the Thai authorities receptive to that concept? Is that what has happened in Thailand? I mean, there are regulatory standards in Thailand. The SEC or the Thai SEC were one of the first regulatory authorities to actually bring this within the scope of licensing. How did they get there? Or what part did you play in that discussion?
Oh, a lot of meetings. I remember the meeting with the Bank of Thailand, right? I was studying the regulations. The definition of money, how they define money in Thailand, was last updated 80 years ago. 80 years ago, 70, 80 years ago. We didn't even use the internet back then. So Bitcoin is not classified as money because it takes time to update the legacy law, right? So then the Bank of Thailand has no authority over Bitcoin transaction because it is not classified as money. So now who would be regulating this space? So they throw it to the SEC, right, to regulate the space. And I think the change was in 2000 and actually before the SEC, we had another issue. The RD, the revenue department, came to our office. How do you report taxes? Are you avoiding taxes? With all these Bitcoin transactions, how do you pay taxes? I had to defend with so many levels, so many meetings with the regulators that we made a small spread. Like we can't pay, in Thailand we pay 7% VAT. The profit was 1% spread on the arbitrage. It's not a stable business model, right? So we had to fight for this SBT, special business tax, right? We were the first to launch, all these frameworks, regulations on so many dimensions, right? The Bank of Thailand, the anti-money laundering reports, how to submit taxes with this type of businesses, right? And the big change was in 2017. I think 1st of April 2017, Japan announced that Bitcoin is legal.
Yeah,
if you remember.
Yeah.
Your big camera chain you can pay stuff with Bitcoins, buy and sell stuff with Bitcoin in Japan. And that's when like the regulators and everyone started to like wake up and and study more. And every day, every year, there are more and more transactions on the platform. More and more people got into Bitcoin transaction, learn about the industry, the technology. So the volume gets bigger and bigger each year, right? And in Thailand, by the end of 2017, that's the second boom, right? The first boom was in 2013, $11 to $1,150. Second boom was $600 to $20,000, right? In 2017, end of 2017. So the first company was sold to Gojek. Mm-hmm. They are the ride sharing, the Uber of Asia, right? They wanted to get into the payment space, acquired the company, and I left and I participated in the first ever SEC Fintech Challenge. In 2017, I spoke on more than 300 stages because after Japan announced that Bitcoin is legal, there were more awareness and a lot more interest, and also the price, right, went up very quickly. There are a lot of media, press, and they had nobody to interview because nobody has done this apart from me in the country. So I've been spoken on over 300 stages, but I thought that's not enough. We need to demo the potential of blockchain. So I participated in the first ever SEC Fintech Challenge. I created a stock exchange 2.0. Back then in Thailand, to settle a stock, it took T plus 3 days.
T plus 3, yeah.
Now it's T plus 2, but still not acceptable.
Yeah.
Right. So we created a T plus 0 instant settlement, right? Stock exchange 2.0. And we ended up becoming the winner of that fintech challenge. And I came to the SEC and said, well, I want to turn this into a real business. And I said, well, what's the point of creating a fintech competition if the winner cannot turn this into a real business, right? So they started to create this sandbox program, right? So we can test in a closed environment. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky because early in 2018, that's when Bitcoin reached the highest point, $20,000. The Minister of Finance ordered the Thai SEC, right, to have a regulation for this space in particular. They did not order the Bank of Thailand because Bitcoin is not classified as money, right? It takes too long to change the definition of money in Thailand. So they ordered the SEC. And luckily, I was working with them on the framework, on the sandbox. So we turned that quickly into a digital asset exchange license. So after realizing that a proper license is coming out in 2018, I started to fundraise, right? And I was able to close $2.1 million at a $16 million valuation. It was the highest seed round in the Thai startup history back then.
But let me ask you, and BitCup is huge in that market and a very, very clear leader in that industry. Exchanges like BitCup for the Thai population, they are the interaction or the primary sort of point of interaction with the ecosystem or the technology. But what would you say, I mean, and this is something I hear come up every so often. People talk about blockchain, etc. But what would you say around the criticism that exists, not of BitCup, but of the ecosystem, that we're yet to see real sort of applications and use cases of the technology beyond, let's say, Bitcoin as a unit of value or digital storage of value, the actual all of the stuff that's happened around that, and exchanges are very central points where a lot of activity around that happens. But the actual application, what would you say to that, Topp?
You're right. That is true. That is correct. I think the main KPI of exchanges around the world going forward is not on trading volume, but other activities beyond trading volumes, other applications, right? But I think the reason why most of the people said they haven't seen utility of this technology was because most of the people are living in a bubble. I mean, I have credit cards, I have phones, I'm staying in a country with price stability. But if you go to Argentina or Venezuela or Ukraine right now, or African countries, they keep all their wealth in Bitcoin because of the hyperinflation, right? Or because of the badly run financial infrastructure. They can leapfrog easily with a phone that is connected to the internet. They can migrate their wealth and start a new life without having to leave their cars at the airport, leaving their houses at the airport, and nobody can take away your wealth. Right? That's the economic freedom that this technology is able to provide. And I mean, it is helping right now 2 billion, people were saying at Davos, 2 billion people are currently unbanked. They cannot participate in the economy because they're excluded. Simply because they're not making enough money for them to be bankable, for the banks to bank them with profitability, because banks have this high sunk cost on opening branches, armored trucks to move money around, ATM machines, right? Then they need to make money back by onboarding the right clients. And people in the Philippines or in Asia in particular, right? 50% of the population are unbanked because they don't make enough money for them to be a good customer for the banks, right?
Yeah, and it's incredible, isn't it, to see there were some global adoption indexes that are published by the Chainalysis Group, etc., and the top 10 in the world. I think 4 of those countries were from the Southeast Asia region. Thailand were 8th in the world in terms of the adoption rate. So a lot of it makes complete sense. I think number 1 was Vietnam in the globe, but the adoption rates are high. The activity is high within exchange platforms. Exchange platforms are the primary interaction, the point of interaction between that user community and the technology. Do you think, because it's such a global industry, are there issues around, I mean, I always call it regulatory arbitrage. Thailand in a very strong position. But if I'm an average user on the street in whatever country I am in the world, do I know the difference between BitHub and FTX or XYZ or whoever it might be? Is regulatory arbitrage an issue? Are people or platforms trying to place themselves in countries or jurisdictions where it's easier? Or do users understand that if their counterpart is, in your example, BitHub in Thailand, properly regulated, that there's a degree of security? Do you think that there's that understanding within the global community yet, or not really?
I mean, in the past 8 years, we see 2 clear strategies, right? In terms of running an exchange. Either you move fast, break things, apologize later, right? Like FTX. Right, they were able to gain market share quickly, and they founded the company much later than us. Yeah, right. But they cut corners to gain the market share, move fast, break things, and hopefully they can fix things later. And another strategy is a good example is Coinbase. They have been the very first to launch the product in the world. Right, 2011, I think. And they prefer to move in a steady manner. They prefer to work closely with the regulators, right? And they prefer to not cut corners, right? And it's clear after the incidents last year, it was a tough year. Like Luna, FTX, all these 3 arrows, dominoes impact. The ones that run properly did not have any impact. We did not get any impact, right? And clearly, the regulations, we're moving towards a latter strategy everywhere, right? There'll be stricter, tighter regulations. I mean, unregulated players mess things up, but the regulated players are the ones that are being punished with even stricter regulations.
Yeah. But what would you say, Topp, to the point of, let's say, I mean, FTX were regulated. I mean, they were regulated. we're not going to go into standards and assessments.
I think the key word here is standardization, right? Before we talk about transparency, before we talk about governance, right? Before we talk about regulation, we need to have this definition of or clear standardization across the world. For example, in Thailand, right? BitCup has 9 companies now, right? And the main one is the exchange. The exchange became the CII of the country, the country's critical information infrastructure. It requires us to send daily reports, right, to the regulators. It's almost like proof of reserve, right? And maybe it's in the hearing right now. We may need an NCR 100% now, NCR on top of our customers' deposits. And this money, right, net capital reserves, has to be our own money. Apart from keeping customers' money one-to-one, dollar to dollar, right? And we cannot leverage customers' money on even money market, nothing, right? Savings only, right? But on top of that, we need our own money, NCR, 100%, right? And we are not allowed to use this NCR even for payroll, nothing, just money like sitting in a bank as a blanket deposit. Right? If you talk to other regulated players, they're not gonna, most of them, even just to submit daily reports, they're gonna push back and say this is too much.
Way too much. I mean, I would say way beyond that. I would say that there are lots of jurisdictions in the world that have basically sought to introduce standards of regulation of the space that are purely relating to AML and KYC. So a simple.
That's it, right?
That, and there are many countries, and they've looked to comply with the FATF recommendations and introduce standards for registration or licensing, which are very, very basic. Obviously, if you take out of a big global trading platform requirements of governance and the segregation of customer assets, et cetera, that's how you end up in problems. But my question is, if I'm an average user on the street, the requirements that BitHub are subject to are extremely high in that global context, but I don't know that. So if I'm an average user on the street, do I know the difference between BitHub or Platform X that asked me for a passport copy when I onboard?
No, I don't think the users will know. I mean, if you look at the traditional banking sector, I don't think average common man users on the street would know if a bank in Gibraltar is safer than a bank in the UK. But on the back end, I think we need to fix the standardization of a bank in Gibraltar and a bank in the UK. They must meet the same standards. Yeah. Because on the customer-facing part, they would have no idea. Right? Yeah. But in the crypto space, those who have been in the space long enough, in the industry long enough, we would get the word of mouth. That's the extra reputation, a branding perspective advantage that people tend to trust us more. Right?
And what would you say, Topp, to the question that because in a post FTX world, and let's just use FTX as an example of a regulated exchange, an entity, a very centralized, a CeFi-related platform, and that created all the issues surrounding it, which we won't go into. The trust has fallen away from this concept of a centralized counterpart and this whole sort of middleman to middleware argument that now, look, guys, there are too many issues around regulated platforms. Trust the technology, don't trust the entity. So let's all move to decentralized networks. Let's move to a DeFi universe. Let's not use BitHub. Let's only use DEX-related platforms. Is that something that you see happening? Will that happen more? Have people lost trust or faith in regulated counterparts? They trust the technology more, or is that not happening?
It's a matter of time. If you talk about short-term, medium-term, or long-term, right? In the short term, like my grandmother or grandfather will not be able to use DeFi. Mm-hmm. We need to humanize the technology, right? People know how to use Skype now, how to use Zoom now, but nobody knows what a TCP/IP protocol is, right? People knows how to use Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, but Nobody knows what an SMTP protocol is.
Yeah.
So we need to humanize, right, for the short term. Maybe in the long term, once money is no longer paper-based, once we are in the Web3, once people are, equipped with, how we are able, everyone in the world can log into their emails now for Web2. In the future, people can log into their own wallet for Web3. Maybe that's when the DeFi would take off. But you still need the exchange as a transition, as a bridge from the old world to the new world. Otherwise, how are you able to convert fiat to crypto? Because with DeFi, they can only allow you to exchange values from digital to digital, not from physical to digital. You need an exchange for that. And also, I don't think the old world would be happy here, right? With fully DeFi applications, running the world.
Yeah.
We need to strike the balance between the old world and the new world.
That's a really good point. And I mean, I always use the ultimate DeFi project out there is the Bitcoin protocol, and access to DeFi or access to BTC hasn't largely through the 2 billion accumulated users around the world, tends to be through regulated counterparts, or the biggest percentage at least is. It might be through Xapo, Coinbase and other platforms, BigHub, etc. Do you think that will emerge to the wider DeFi space? Will the regulated exchanges like BigHub become the access points to DeFi? And you've done some work around that already, and these permissioned entry points, etc. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. The concept is called permissioned DeFi, right? Where we are making sure that both worlds are happy. Old world, they are happy with AML, KYC, CDD, all these requirements. And the new world, we must have an open system where they can move fast, break things with greatest freedom to innovate. So I believe that the exchange would become the gateway, whitelisted. We will need to whitelist the addresses, and we need to map the face to each addresses. But once they go through the gateway, right, they're allowed to have full freedom to innovate. I think that's where the world is heading. It's a hybrid model, right? You cannot just be moving too slow and be too conservative when the fourth industrial revolution is coming, with all the technology, AI, big data, blockchain. We found this one interesting graphs. If you look back 5,000 years of history, in terms of productivity or human development, you see a straight line mostly. And during the Industrial Revolution, where we have more muscle power, like machine can lift heavy things, right? We leverage on technology. Then we see the exponential improvement. But now we're in the phase where we have more intelligent power, mind power, AI, fourth industrial revolution. It's going to be through the roof. The amount of the innovations that will come out, it will change the way we communicate. It will change the way we work. It will change the way we travel. It will change the businesses, right, entirely. So we cannot move too slow either. But again, we cannot move fast and break things like Facebook because we have a lot of customers' money, right? So we need to strike the right balance, and that's why the word fintech comes in. We're not a financial company. We are not a tech company either. We don't move fast and break things like tech company. We're a fintech company, right? Strike the right balance between the two worlds.
I think that's I think it's an incredibly correct approach to this. But let me put a pure DeFi hat on for a second and say, how would you respond to the question of, DeFi is around accessibility and the democratization of finance and completely open and transparent networks that anyone at any part of the world with a mobile phone should be able to gain access to, and you're somehow restricting that. Not you, but anyone that builds a permission sort of entry-exit point system. Is it restricting DeFi, or do you think it's the correct and only way to approach it? Difficult question.
I think the best analogy to answer this question is to look back at the phone system. Do you remember the Nokia 3310 days? It's a closed system. That's like a traditional banking services. It's a closed system, right? Innovations come from the top down, the CEOs, and all he can think about is three things, right? The phone can call people, can send SMS, and can play a snake game, and that's the end of the innovation. And then we have this iPhone system where, Steve Jobs invented an open system, but regulated open system, right? We have this application store on the iPhone, right? The only invention of Steve Jobs was an iPhone. And he never has to invent again, right? The rest of the world, people, every corner around the world can think, and invent new things for him. Now an iPhone can call a taxi. Now an iPhone can, send food to your home, can find your date, can, send money across. Innovation comes from anyone, anywhere, but in a regulated manner.
Yeah.
And is Nokia changing the world or iPhone changing the world? Right? We
That's
can
a
also
very good analogy. Very
right.
good.
We can change the world like an iPhone, where we allow DeFi to go, with all these innovations, open system, but obviously you have a regulated app, like Apple Store version.
That's a very good. That's a very good analogy. That's a very good. I really like that. And let me ask you another question that sort of, it's not exactly the same question, but it attaches to the same sort of concept. The interactive, let's call it payment rails between, or in the, let's call it the Web3 exchange, DeFi universe. Everyone talks about stable coins. That they are the core sort of payment system or network of that world. We also hear a lot about CBDCs, and you've been involved a bit around that, etc. Do you see that in similar ways? Do you see CBDCs taking over stablecoin infrastructure? Do you see them existing side by side? Do you see like key differences between them? Where do you see the future in that context?
Oh, I think they complement each other because we will eventually move towards full interoperability of payment system. If you look, the internet space was a good example, right? Before the internet arrives, communication used to be restricted and in a closed system, right? You all the television channels are restricted. You need to get a license. Radio channels, being monitored, by the government. You don't have the freedom to communicate, to share information. But once we have this TCP/IP protocol, internet protocol, the Web 2 stuff, right? It democratizes communication, right? It democratizes information. So now you have the freedom to choose which application you want to communicate on. I know you guys use WhatsApp here. We use Line in Thailand. Somebody uses Facebook Messenger. Someone you prefer Skype. Somebody prefer Microsoft Teams. We have the freedom to choose which applications we want to communicate on. Same with the value exchange industry. Before it's a closed system, like banking is regulated, right? Credit cards, there are only a few options to exchange value. But blockchain is going to democratize value in the same manner that the internet democratizes information sharing. So people will have the freedom to choose which platform they want to exchange value on. Right? So, whether it is CBDCs or stable coins or Bitcoin protocols, eventually we will have full interoperability. Like, I don't know, like now you can upload say this podcast on YouTube. I can also copy and paste this video file on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. We have full interoperability. Even though Facebook is a different owner to, I don't know, it's TikTok or Instagram, right? Facebook, they have different owners, different companies. But the files, the information is we can exchange the information with full interoperability now. And same with values. If you're on CBDCs, and if I say, imagine, I think in the next wave, in-game assets would be huge. Imagine a 13-year-old collecting swords in a game, and he gets hungry. He walks over to Burger King. he can wire his swords in-game assets, right? And when he transfer the swords, it will automatically convert into whatever values that Burger King wants. Burger King points, Burger King coins, CBDC, BTC. The recipient doesn't need to know what the sender, like what value the sender sent in. They just know that, oh, it hits my wallet with this format that I want. With full interoperability, right? All the flows would be humanized on the back end.
Do you think, Topp, that, I mean, stablecoins they are built on open networks, and CBDCs, we don't quite know yet, but I mean, they are effectively forms of programmable money to an extent. There could be situations where CBDCs are restricted by how much can be transferred across a particular border or how much can be held by an individual. So it has other programmability that I expect will be introduced in a much more closed system, whilst stablecoin networks are much more open in that context. Do you agree with that?
Like internet, intranet and extranet, they can coexist.
Yeah.
Right? And to have full interoperability technology, it doesn't have to rely on DEX, decentralized exchange protocol. The exchange could be the technology to have full interoperability between the closed system, say fiat or CBDC, to an open system, right? Where we could be the gateway with the interoperability technology.
No, and by the way, I mean, not to talk too much about it, but definitely from our perspective, from a Zappa perspective, marrying the two is critical. We see that as fundamental. The interaction of a blockchain-based payment system like USDC and your bank account, your USD bank account, that is something that obviously we've developed to marry the two together, bringing together the old and new, which is, I think it's very exciting. But let me ask you one other question. Because I've seen and read and people follow developments that are happening all over the world. I think there's been some focus points in some parts of the world. I think Singapore would be one, Hong Kong, slightly different direction. There was some public commentary not that long ago in Singapore about potentially, I'm not going to say restrict, but there's a concern around retail user access to the ecosystem. There's risk, there's volatility risk. Hong Kong took a very different direction. Originally, it was institution only. Now that is also changing. Where do you see, generally speaking, the world moving in that context? Do you think that making a user aware of the risk, let the buyer beware, they're aware of what they're acquiring is enough? Or will you see authorities try to restrict retail access to the ecosystem more and more? Are there other ways you think that will happen or will be developed? What are your thoughts generally on that?
We need more education. Restriction or banning technology doesn't work.
Yeah, completely agree.
It works on theory, but not it's not feasible. It's not practical. So, we see that the previous booms, right, in the past, 2013, 17 booms, 21 boom, were driven by retail investors, and I don't think they will stop. Especially from the operator, we see more and more retail onboarded every year, right? But I believe the next wave is going to be driven by institutional investors. So I think we will have both retail and institutional investors entering the space. If not, even to the extent that some of the countries' reserves, right, central banks' reserve currency would be pegged in Bitcoin. Right? Bitcoin could be one of the countries' reserve. Now we have the SDR, right, special drawing rights, created in 1969 by the IMF. The IMF coin, weighted average of the 5 basket of currencies. Right? We have gold, and I think it's inevitable that we are moving towards Bitcoin as another store value, not just institutional, not just for retail, but at the country's level. I really hope that does happen. But it raises another question in my head, and I wanted to ask you specifically, given your experience in Thailand,
we're seeing a lot today. There are a lot of pressure points emerging in different parts of the world, very publicly in the US, Europe to an extent. Different parts of the world are thinking about how digital asset or crypto ecosystems are allowed to interact with existing financial services ecosystems, primarily the banking world. And that's creating some big pressure points, certainly on USD rails, etc. What is the position in Thailand of the central bank or commercial banks? Do they see this as a regulated industry that they need to facilitate and support? Are there also concerns that are emerging in Thailand? I'm interested because we'll have listeners from different parts of the world that have very different concerns around how their local banks. I'm curious to hear about how things have developed in Thailand.
To be honest, central bankers around the world do not like Bitcoin. They do not like cryptocurrencies, right? But they also understood that you cannot simply ban the technology, right? It's not feasible. It's not practical to ban. So people start to talk about governance more and more, even at the global stage, at Davos, right? It's clear that central bankers do not like cryptocurrencies, but everyone understood that you have to live with it. Technology will evolve, right? Mm-hmm. Evolve anyways. You cannot stop the innovations to happen. You can only push the innovations to happen elsewhere and come back and, serve you later. But you're going to lose the opportunity as a country. So they talk about governance instead of banning more and more. And recently with the war, people realized that SWIFT can be weaponized, right? And obviously, I think everyone is looking to de-risk and looking for alternatives. And blockchain technology could be an alternative way. It's just like those people in the Argentina, Venezuela, right? Bitcoin helps them to store their wealth as an alternative. Mm. So I think, with SWIFT and the war happening, it's clear that we need a global payment system that should not be used as a weaponized payment.
And that I completely understand. But then, like from your perspective as a Thai registered and regulated platform, in terms of the local Thai banks that they do support you. They remain open to that business and interactive completely, right?
We have to separate into two sides. If you talk about commercial banks, yes, they can't wait to innovate and to explore this industry because they know it's the future of their industry. We cannot stick to paper money forever. Right? How are we going to meet net zero, for example? This is like a basic question. Right? We emit 52 billion tons per year and we need to get to zero, right? Net zero within the next 10, 20 years. And fossil fuel accounts for only 26% of the 52 billion tons. And during COVID, we stopped flying, we stopped all the restaurants, hotels, and we still emit 50 billion tons. So that means we have to reduce every dimension of our lives. We have to have green clothes, fabric, green plastic, green cement, electricity car. We cannot keep killing trees for paper money. Right? It's obvious that money would be digital. It's the future of their industry. And what about the 2 billion people that are currently unbanked because the traditional banking system, the cost is too high. The CapEx, OpEx cost of opening bank branches, armored trucks to move money around. So they know this is where the world is heading. And they want to be in, but they can't. Right? On the central banking side, right, they don't encourage because they have different KPIs here. Right? If you understand them, if you look at each entity in terms of their KPIs, right? Mm-hmm. You understand the SEC more because their main KPI is investors protection. That's why in some countries they're not allowed retail investors to trade. If you look at commercial banks, their KPI is to thrive and survive in the fast-changing world, right? And if you look at the central banks, they care about financial stability. So obviously they don't want customers' deposits or infrastructures of the countries to be playing with the newest technology first, because they care about financial stability, capital control, right, monetary policy, effectiveness. Imagine if everyone is using Bitcoin. There's no monetary intervention with fiat. They cannot control the interest rate. They cannot control the inflation. So everyone has different KPIs. But I think the key is we need a conductor, right, to make sure that all the musician plays the same song. Right? As one country, one KPI, one Thailand, one region strong.
I mean, I really hope that can happen. I mean, it's great to hear that there is that sort of approach from the commercial banks in Thailand as well, particularly given what we're seeing in different parts of the world. But let me ask you a couple of almost, I think, close to final questions. But there's a lot of activity in lots of parts of the world. Southeast Asia is one, Thailand absolutely. Where do you see the next 5 years in terms of adoption numbers or rates? We hear a lot about play to earn games. We hear a lot about unregulated NFT ecosystems as well. We have your 1,000% growth rates per annum that hopefully will continue. Lots of different things are happening. There are new protocols, new infrastructure developing, new concepts all of the time. What's going to be the winner over the next 5 years? Where do you see the biggest focus or area of development? What do you think?
Asia, Southeast Asian region in particular. There are a few reasons why. Because right now we are living in a fragmented world, right? There's a decoupling going on between China and the US, Russia and Ukraine, right? Not just left and right, but also global north and global south divide, inequality, right? Supply chain are separated, are fragmented, like post-COVID, right? If you see, there's this clear trend where all the Chinese stocks are being delisted in the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and relisted in Hong Kong, right? And it's clear that the world is not like the same as the previous world, where we see globalization is wins for everyone. We are moving towards a deglobalization, fragmented world. ASEAN, we are the one that swings the vote, right? We are the neutral ground. We don't pick the sides. We don't have the aging population issues. Everyone, mostly in the Philippines, in Indonesia, the average age of working population is less than 30 years old, right? We are rich in natural resource, right? 16. We are only able to map 16% of the ocean, right? The other 84% are undiscovered. A lot of hidden resources there to untapped, and they need stability. Because investors need stability. They don't want to invest in China, with the fight with the US, decoupling, or global north, global south with the digital divide. They will look at ASEAN as the new S curve, right? After 2024, we will see an unprecedented amount of investment coming into the Southeast Asian region because of various factors. But also, legacy is not a good thing. Legacy banking system, legacy law. ASEAN had nothing built. But we had something built, but not as deep rooted as the advanced nation.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, there will be less people lobbying around because they need to make their money back on the initial investment, previous investment, the sunk cost. Right, we can leapfrog with the latest technology. So I think the next growth is definitely in Asia.
And if that does happen, or hopefully will happen for you guys as well, what would you say are the biggest risks, or the biggest blockers, or the biggest issues that could restrict that level of growth in the ASEAN region?
Maybe two things. One is ASEAN specific is rules of law. Rules of law in democratization, democracy countries are going down everywhere, especially in Asia. So we need good rules of law. Because most of the countries are military run, to be honest, right? But to have a thriving business, we need fairness and good business practice and governance, right? And the second issue or obstacle would be regulations. Yeah. How do we fix the standardization? How do we strike the balance between moving fast and breaking things and protecting the investors? The right balance, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. This is all extremely interesting. One other thing, I'm going to ask you one final question before I do something else. But BitCup, you guys are a dominant force in that area. What are your next steps? Are you moving out to other parts of the world? What are the natural sort of growth steps for you guys?
Yeah, BitCup is the biggest blockchain digital assets ecosystem in Thailand. And the next phase is to become a regional company, group of companies. So we hope to expand our products and services beyond Thailand. We're eyeing Southeast Asian region as the new market. And I don't think we're going to be dominant in Europe or in other places, because we believe in this thesis that after 2024, that's where the biggest growth lies, which is in Asia.
Well, that does sound fantastic, and that sounds very exciting. I really hope you guys can do that, and I hope that we can be on board with you as that develops as well and support you along the way. We're very, very different, obviously, but there are lots of things that, as you know, that we're exploring, and I'm very excited about that as well. I'm going to conclude things with one quote that I read of yours, and I'm going to read it just because it was really fantastic, and it was on a public social media post of yours, and you said, "Our voice is not a measurement of value beyond the goals we set. We'll make mistakes and fall short, put ourselves out on the battlefield, experience the thrill of victories, endure challenges, and give our all for a noble cause, and learn from our failures." And I think that's a really, really strong message, and one I really support. We'll all do that in our very different ways, but it's an extremely strong message. And for us, it's been wonderful having you here, a real pleasure. And I do hope we can continue to talk and explore things moving forward. But thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me here.